The snow was coming down in sheets, blurring the landscape into an endless stretch of white. The storm had been raging for hours, and the wind howled like a pack of wolves. No one was prepared for the fury of this blizzard. In the midst of it all, one man stood defiant against the elements, and against the orders given to him. His name was Jack Dalton, a seasoned rancher who had spent his life on the windswept plains of Wyoming. Jack had known hardship, had known the biting cold of winter like few others. He knew how to survive, but this time, the storm wasn't just a battle for survival, it was a test of character. The railway company had sent word that the trains were to be stopped for the night, the tracks closed off to prevent accidents. Jack had received the order to secure the ranch's stretch of railway line and to make sure no trains ran through it. The storm was dangerous, they said, and the risks of a derailment were too great. But Jack wasn't just any man. He was a man who knew that sometimes, when you're faced with a choice between following orders and doing what's right, the only thing that matters is helping others. So, despite the company's directive, he made the decision to keep the tracks clear, because there was a train out there, struggling against the snow, stranded somewhere in the wilderness. He grabbed his thick woolen coat, tightened his boots, and saddled up his horse. "I'm not going to let them freeze to death out there," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The train, a local passenger service, was already hours overdue. The passengers were trapped, cold, scared, and vulnerable. And Jack, despite knowing the dangers, refused to let that be their fate. As he rode through the bitter winds, the snow whipped against his face, stinging with icy ferocity. But Jack kept his focus. He had to keep the tracks open. His heart raced as he approached the first signal crossing. The tracks ahead were blanketed in a thick coat of snow, but the faint, distant sound of a train whistle reached his ears. It was still out there. There was hope. Jack hurried to clear the snow, shoveling with every ounce of strength he had. His hands were raw and numb from the cold, but he didn't stop. The storm seemed to grow more intense by the minute, but Jack's resolve didn't waver. He had a job to do, not just for the railway company, but for the people who depended on that train to get home to their families. In the distance, a faint light appeared, bobbing like a lighthouse in the storm. The train was coming. But it wasn't moving fast enough. He pushed harder, shoveling with desperation, the sound of the train's whistle growing louder. And then, as the train finally emerged from the white abyss, Jack saw something that made his heart stop. The engine was limping, barely moving, with smoke trailing from the top and sparks flickering beneath. The storm had taken its toll on the tracks, and the train was losing steam. Jack didn't hesitate. He shouted to the conductor through the wind, signaling for him to stop. The train screeched to a halt just in time, and Jack rushed to the front. "You're lucky I kept the tracks clear," he said, his voice hoarse from the cold. "You'd be stuck out here all night, waiting for rescue." The conductor, a man in his 50s with graying hair, looked at Jack in disbelief. "You're the one who kept it open." "But the orders." "I couldn't leave you out here to freeze," Jack replied, cutting him off. "You're not just a job to me. You're people. You matter." The conductor stood still for a moment, stunned by the rancher's words. Then, with a weary smile, he nodded. "I didn't think anyone would come for us. Thank you. We were out there in the middle of nowhere. If you hadn't done this." Jack simply nodded, turning to help the passengers who were now disembarking, their faces pale and shaken, but relieved. Some of them were older, some young mothers with children, all grateful for the warmth of Jack's rescue. As the passengers boarded back on the train, a sense of peace settled over Jack. He had done the right thing. The storm would still rage, but at least the passengers were safe. And in the end, that was what mattered. The train slowly pulled away, the wheels crunching through the snow. Jack watched it disappear into the distance, his heart swelling with pride. But there was more to it than just the success of the mission. There was something deeper. The compassion he had shown wasn't just about saving lives, it was about showing that kindness, even in the harshest of circumstances, was the most important thing a person could offer. In that moment, Jack realized something profound. We are all connected, and sometimes, when the world is falling apart, the greatest thing we can do is help one another through the storm. As the blizzard continued to howl, Jack made his way back to his ranch, the echoes of the train's whistle still ringing in his ears. The storm was fierce, but his heart was warm, knowing that in his own small way, he had made a difference. And sometimes, that's all it takes, a single act of kindness to remind us that in the darkest of times, humanity shines the brightest.